Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. Today we will explore a horrifying case that is almost impossible to believe, a story that will make you question whether such people truly exist in this world. So how did this haunting story unfold? Let's discover it right now. Stephen Alston Davis was born and raised in the small town of Bingham, England, in the loving arms of his parents. From an early age, Stephen showed an inquisitive nature and was full of ambition for everything he was passionate about. In particular, he was drawn to the colorful world of information technology. After completing high school, Stephen decided to leave his hometown for a larger city to pursue a university education and immerse himself deeper in the IT field. Through his talent and relentless effort, he excellently completed his studies at age 19 and was immediately welcomed by a prestigious technology company in Nottingham. With his outstanding abilities, Stephen quickly made an impression and was promoted to a high position within the company, an admirable achievement for someone so young. After just 2 years of dedication, when he had just turned 21, he received an attractive offer from a technology company in Hong Kong with a salary 3 times his current one. Faced with this important crossroads, the only thing that made Stephen hesitate was the concern of being away from his family. However, with boundless love and the desire for her son to have valuable experiences abroad, his mother encouraged and supported Stephen's decision. With the blessing of his family, he accepted the offer and began a new journey in Hong Kong, where both opportunities and unexpected challenges would unfold in his life. After several years of living and working in Hong Kong, Stephen was entrusted by his company to manage a branch in the Philippines, specifically in Angeles City, a city known for its nightlife entertainment and prostitution. Since Stephen moved to Angeles City, he began frequenting nightclubs filled with entertainment girls, many of whom were actually teenagers or underage, but had lied about their age to work as entertainers at nightclubs. There, Stephen met and liked a girl named Evelyn Bohal. In reality, Evelyn was only 15 years old, but to get a job at the nightclub, she had claimed to be 21. This initially shocked Stephen, but after regular conversations with Evelyn, during which she even confided about her life, they became very close and often went out together on days off. After hearing Evelyn's confessions, Stephen gradually learned about her circumstances, which were truly sad. Evelyn came from Daram Samar village, a remote village in the Philippine archipelago. Most residents there were illiterate because they didn't attend school, including Evelyn. In her village, men typically became fishermen, while women only became wives because they had no other options. As a result, many girls from the village migrated to larger cities to become prostitutes, including Evelyn, and this was considered normal there. After becoming an entertainer at a nightclub in Angeles City, Evelyn was paid very little. For each nude dance performance, she was only paid 68 pesos by the club, about $1.25. And for each sexual encounter, she was only paid 344 pesos, about $6.25. Even worse, commissions from customers also had to be submitted to the club, and the club also mandated tips if one wanted to be served. So why did Evelyn accept this? Because there were many women like Evelyn willing to do anything for a job, so they were forced to accept those rates. It was their only choice. But Evelyn's dark side finally ended after she met Stephen. After nearly a year of being close, Stephen truly found Evelyn to be innocent and sincere, causing him to fall for her. Eventually, they began building a relationship, bringing new joy to Stephen. He was so happy that he called his mother and told her that he had finally fallen in love with a Filipino girl who worked as an entertainer at a nightclub in Angeles City. Initially, Stephen's mother was suspicious because Evelyn's background was considered bad. But because Stephen was clearly in love with Evelyn, his mother eventually approved of their relationship for Stephen's happiness. After getting approval from his mother, Stephen immediately tried to persuade Evelyn to quit her job at the nightclub. But the club initially wouldn't allow Evelyn to leave. So, Stephen had to personally intervene, and after difficult negotiations with the club, they finally allowed Evelyn to leave after Stephen paid 34,000 pesos, about $618. Finally, Evelyn escaped from the nightclub and began a new life with Stephen, making many of her friends who still worked at the nightclub envious because she was so lucky to start a serious relationship with a wealthy and sincere European man. Afterward, Stephen requested marriage leave from his company and took Evelyn on vacation while introducing her to his parents in Hong Kong. For this reason, his parents flew from England to Hong Kong. This was the first time Stephen's mother saw and met Evelyn, and she immediately praised Evelyn's beauty. She even showed great affection for Evelyn regardless of her background. Here, Stephen also married Evelyn, with strong support from his parents. Afterward, Stephen invited his parents to join them on their honeymoon in Puerto Galera, a small island in the Philippines. After the honeymoon, Stephen's parents returned to England, while Stephen and Evelyn returned to Angeles City. But not long after, Stephen received orders from his company to return to work at headquarters in Hong Kong. So, they started living in Hong Kong in a luxurious apartment. From then on, Evelyn's life changed 180 degrees as she became a wealthy woman without needing to work, not even having to do anything because they had housekeepers to cook and clean the house, as Evelyn knew nothing about cooking or taking care of a home. A year later, they had their first child named Jessica Bohal Davis. After 2 years of living in Hong Kong, they moved back to Angeles City because Stephen was reassigned to the Philippines. In Angeles City, they lived in a luxurious residential area, with a gardener to care for the yard, a driver, and several housekeepers, one of whom was Gina, Evelyn's older sister. Stephen hired Gina because he felt sorry that she had no job in her village. Stephen even sent monthly money to Evelyn's parents living in the village. From that money, Evelyn's parents were able to renovate their house in the village, and Evelyn's father finally could buy his own boat for the first time to fish without having to rent one anymore. Meanwhile, Evelyn was sent to school by Stephen because she was still illiterate, having never attended school. She was sent to a special school for illiterate people there. After several years of marriage to Stephen and experiencing a wealthy life, her true personality began to emerge, especially her arrogant and lazy attitude. She realized that at home, she was the boss. So, at home, she spent time just relaxing and spending a lot of money on unnecessary luxury items, even surprising Stephen with Evelyn's extravagant spending habits, who was particularly unwise in using money. Because of this, Evelyn and Stephen often argued, acknowledged by Evelyn's sister, who was then working as a housekeeper in their house. Not only that, according to Evelyn's sister's testimony, in the village, Evelyn often looked down on locals, even calling her own family a poor family. Because of this, Stephen often felt ashamed, feeling he had failed in educating his wife. On the other hand, Stephen was always busy with work, which was his responsibility at that time. But because Stephen was forgiving, he always forgave and tried to understand his wife. However, there was something that made Stephen begin to not tolerate Evelyn anymore, after learning that their children were often hungry because Evelyn frequently neglected them. Not only that, the monthly money Stephen gave to Evelyn, supposedly for paying household staff and monthly expenses, always disappeared without a trace. Evelyn always blamed the housekeepers for stealing her money. But because this happened almost every month, Stephen began to realize that the money didn't actually disappear, but was wastefully spent by Evelyn. The situation reached a climax when it was time for their children to start school. With a vision and dream for a bright future for the children, Stephen had fully prepared financially for the children to access the best education at a prestigious international school in Angeles City, where tuition was substantial. But while he put his heart into educating the future generation, Evelyn secretly registered the children at a free school and gifted herself a present from the expensive tuition money. When this plot was uncovered, extreme anger and disappointment consumed Stephen's heart. As someone who always prioritized education, he couldn't accept that his children's future was being traded for their mother's greed. Despite the pain and hurt, his forgiving and kind nature won, and Stephen once again chose to forgive Evelyn, perhaps with the faint hope that the woman would change for the love of her family. The year 2001 marked a new milestone in their family with the birth of their second child. However, Stephen's trust in Evelyn's ability to be a mother had been depleted. With nagging worry, he contacted his mother in distant England, not only to share the good news, but also as a silent plea for help, hoping his mother would come to the Philippines to ensure the newborn received proper care. Not to disappoint her son, the mother quietly traveled thousands of miles to join the small family. But what awaited her was an Evelyn completely different from the obedient, respectful daughter-in-law she had met. With the keen eyes and sensitive heart of a mother, she quickly noticed unusual signs in Evelyn's behavior. The daughter-in-law of years past had now crowned herself the queen of the house, living in a whirlwind of endless shopping trips and outings. The family home seemed to be just a place Evelyn stopped by when tired, and even on the rare occasion she was home, Evelyn spent all her time on mysterious phone calls, whispering in Tagalog, a language Stephen's mother couldn't understand. What tightened the mother-in-law's heart wasn't just the content of the conversation, but the intimate tone, the giggles, and the way Evelyn lowered her voice. Clearly not the way a married woman talks to ordinary friends. More suspiciously, these calls only happened on days when Stephen was away from home. From here, Stephen's mother began to suspect that it seemed like Evelyn wasn't really faithful to Stephen. However, initially she chose to remain silent out of respect for their relationship's privacy. She planned to tell Stephen, but at a time she deemed appropriate. But not long after a month at Stephen's house, his mother decided to return to England, and she still hadn't spoken directly with Stephen about Evelyn's behavior at home. But gradually, Stephen finally knew that Evelyn was cheating because he had witnessed it firsthand. This happened because the money that should have been used for family needs once again disappeared without a trace. This time, Stephen was determined to track it down to the end, and what he discovered was like a knife straight to his heart. Evelyn had used family money to buy a luxury motorcycle for Arnold, a security guard at the market whom he had never heard mentioned. Deeper investigation revealed an even more bitter truth. Arnold wasn't just the gift recipient but had been Evelyn's secret lover for many years. This time, the cracks in Stephen's heart couldn't be mended anymore. The extreme hurt, anger, and disappointment transformed the patient, tolerant husband into a hard and decisive man. Stephen not only demanded the lost money back, but also put an end to the marriage with the woman he had once trusted with both his soul and life. In his eyes now, Evelyn was no longer someone who could be entrusted with faith. She had betrayed not only love, but also the sacred trust he had given her over the years. But before divorcing, Stephen asked Evelyn to promise to continue her education so that she could read and get a good job later, so she wouldn't have to go back to being an entertainer at a nightclub. That was Stephen's intention. But Evelyn refused to divorce and continued to apologize. Because Stephen still loved and also pitied Evelyn's situation, he eventually forgave her again and canceled the divorce. But from then on, Stephen never gave monthly money to Evelyn anymore, because from that point, all financial matters were held and managed by Stephen. But instead of awakening to her husband's love and generosity, Evelyn seemed to have completely lost her mind in the spiral of lust. Just a few months after the promise to change, she was once again caught cheating with Arnold. At this point, Stephen began to seriously plan to divorce Evelyn, and from then on, they began sleeping separately. Even due to the stress, Stephen returned home less often and chose to live in a townhouse with Mike, his colleague, also from England. They rented this townhouse in Manila City, only about an hour's drive from Angeles City. And it was here that the relationship between Stephen and Evelyn began to truly distance. Evelyn, who was about to be divorced, apparently had made Arnold worried because Arnold knew that if Evelyn was divorced, she wouldn't receive Stephen's inheritance. From deep within the darkness of greed, a sinister idea began to form in Arnold's mind. If Stephen was no longer in this world before the divorce proceedings were completed, all assets would naturally belong to Evelyn, and indirectly to him. With cold calculation, Arnold sketched a dark scenario. Stephen, a lonely foreigner on Philippine soil, would be an easy target. No one would know, no one would care, and no one could suspect. Amazingly, when Arnold whispered this evil proposal into Evelyn's ear, she didn't hesitate but agreed immediately, and the two began looking for an opportunity to execute their plan. Although the relationship was strained, Stephen still frequently visited his children in Angeles. Seeing an opportunity, Evelyn skillfully asked about his current residence. Stephen shared that he was temporarily staying at a house in Manila with Mike, each with their own room. With the reason of wanting to bring the children to Manila to visit their father, Evelyn suggested getting a spare key. Without a hint of suspicion about the dark intentions hidden behind that sweet suggestion, Stephen revealed the detailed address and gave her the key, an unconscious decision paving the way for the upcoming tragedy. With the key and address in hand, Evelyn immediately sought out Arnold, her eyes lighting up in sinful excitement. They quickly realized this was the final piece for their dark plan. Without hesitation, Arnold contacted Alexander Degami, a fellow security guard at the market who had a reckless nature and love for money. With the promise of a generous reward for a mission described as simple, eliminating a lonely foreigner with no one to protect him, Degami immediately nodded in agreement. Utilizing a network of connections with those who had criminal records, the group quickly acquired a gun. The final piece in the death chess game was a borrowed car, sufficient to take them to the scene and quickly escape after completing the plan. After everything was ready, on the evening of July 17, 2002, all three headed to Manila, taking about an hour. Finding the destination address, they quickly deployed their plan. Arnold and Degami would break into the house to eliminate Stephen, while Evelyn would keep watch from the discreetly parked car by the road. But at the last minute, a crack appeared in the perfect plan. Sudden fear rose, causing Evelyn to not dare stay alone in the cold darkness of the car. With quick thinking, she proposed a solution. Robin, her brother-in-law living in Manila, would be the one to sit and wait in the car with Evelyn. Therefore, they went to pick up Robin at his house. There, Evelyn only invited Robin to join her in the car without mentioning their plan at all. But because he was paid, Robin agreed to go along without knowing what the plan was. Afterward, they returned to the address where Stephen was living. There, Arnold and Degami got out of the car, having prepared guns and wearing masks, and they entered the house using the spare key Stephen had given to Evelyn earlier. The problem was that Arnold and Degami had never seen Stephen's face, while Evelyn had explained in the car that Stephen was living with a friend who was also English. So, Evelyn warned them not to aim at the wrong target. When they entered the house, they went straight to the second floor and broke into Mike's room. There, they immediately pointed the gun at Mike, who was then frightened and knew nothing. They asked Mike, "Are you Stephen?" while trembling and with the gun pointed at his head. Eventually, Mike said that Stephen was downstairs. They found a room downstairs and without hesitation, immediately broke down the door and charged in. In the cold moment of the night, 4 gunshots rang out, taking Stephen's life right on his own bed. After the last gunshot, they hastily disappeared into the night. Mike, who was upstairs, heard the unusual sounds and hurriedly ran down after the perpetrators had left. His eyes froze in horror as he witnessed his close friend lying motionless on the blood-soaked bed. With trembling hands, Mike called the police while shouting for help from surrounding residents. In moments, the sound of police sirens rang out, but all rescue efforts were too late. Stephen had forever departed. That very night, police conducted a crime scene investigation. Notably, no valuables had been taken, causing investigators to quickly rule out the theory of a common robbery. While in shock but still maintaining composure, Mike shared his suspicions about Evelyn, the victim's wife, with the police. As Stephen's closest confidant, Mike had known all the cracks in their marriage. He recounted stories of Evelyn's affair, even clearly remembering the face of her lover through photos Stephen had once painfully shared. What made Mike certain of his suspicion was that when the 2 intruders had broken into his room, though only for a moment, he had still managed to see the eyes of one of them, eyes he immediately recognized as belonging to the man in the photo, the one who had destroyed his friend's marriage. However, the police didn't really listen to Mike's testimony. Instead, they were more interested in suspecting Stephen's business colleagues at the company. So, the police wasted time investigating Stephen's company, though it was completely irrelevant and no clues led there. The next day, Mike called Stephen's mother in England. Over the phone, trembling, Mike explained everything, even saying that he was certain all this was related to Evelyn and her lover. When the terrible news reached Stephen's mother in distant England, she was stunned in ultimate pain. In her mind, the image of Evelyn was still the innocent, illiterate girl whom the family had accepted with all empathy. She couldn't imagine how a woman like that could conceive and execute such a cruel conspiracy. However, the details Mike shared about her son's life in the Philippines, about the cracks in the marriage, the lies and betrayals, gradually shook the mother's belief. With a broken heart, she decided to go to the Philippines to find the ultimate truth. Without hesitation, she booked a flight from England, carrying the immeasurable pain of a mother who lost her child, but also carrying an iron determination, both to properly arrange the funeral for her beloved child and to personally trace the clues of this tragedy. After arriving at Stephen's house in Angeles City, initially, his mother didn't immediately express suspicion toward Evelyn, but she secretly noted all of Evelyn's unusual behaviors, hoping the police were also secretly investigating all of Evelyn's actions. Evelyn always appeared distant from Stephen's mother. She also never showed grief like a wife who had just lost her husband, and Evelyn never came near Stephen's coffin. To the extent that Stephen's mother felt as if Stephen's death wasn't a sadness for Evelyn. On the contrary, Evelyn was frequently busy with her phone, and whenever Stephen's mother came near, Evelyn immediately hid her phone, as if there was something she was hiding in that phone. Afterward, Stephen's mother sought out the police handling the case to report all of Evelyn's unusual behaviors that she had noted. However, at that time, the police were still investigating Stephen's company, which greatly disappointed Stephen's mother. It turned out the police still hadn't investigated Evelyn and her lover, despite all clues pointing in their direction. Stephen's company had provided detailed explanations about Stephen within the company, that he truly had no issues with anyone in the company. No one in the company should have been suspected. But it turned out the reason the police were interested in investigating the company was simply because Stephen's monthly salary was considered very high, 60,000 British pounds, about $76,000. Therefore, the police assumed that Stephen might have been killed by business colleagues with motives related to his salary, although there were no clues about this and it was completely irrelevant. The police had spent many weeks investigating the company, allowing the real perpetrators plenty of time to cover their tracks. Because of this, Stephen's mother was really very disappointed with the police investigation, and eventually she hired a private detective from England to independently investigate the case. At that time, Mike, Stephen's close friend, also helped because he knew a lot about Stephen in the Philippines. From here, they together independently investigated Evelyn and her entire family, especially investigating what they had done and where they were at the time of the incident. Usually, if someone lies, they will surely be caught because their statement won't match with the next statement. Because usually, to hide a lie, one has to lie more. So, if the lie is tracked, it will surely reach a dead end, because it doesn't match, which is discovered to be a lie. This is the investigation method conducted by the private detective. After a long and tiring investigation, they finally discovered something unusual from the testimony of Evelyn's sister, Gina, who had once worked as a housekeeper in their house. At that time, Gina lived in Manila with her husband, Robin, who had gone along with Evelyn in the murder. Gina testified that on the night of the incident, Evelyn had indeed picked up and invited her husband to a place that she also didn't know where they were going. Finally, they asked Robin directly. After being persuaded, Robin finally testified that on the night of the incident, he was invited by Evelyn and two men, Arnold and Alexander Dagami, to a place that initially he also didn't know where they were going. So, he just followed because he had been paid. Afterward, they took Robin along, and Robin also didn't know whose house it was. There, Robin was only asked to wait in the car to be with Evelyn. Only Arnold and Dagami entered the house. Not long after, Robin heard gunshots fired 4 times. Afterward, he saw Arnold and Dagami running from the house in a hurry and immediately getting into the car. Afterward, they took Robin home. But before going home, Robin had been threatened by Arnold that if Robin dared to speak up, he would be killed. Because Arnold also admitted that he had many friends who were gangsters in Manila, this was the reason Robin was initially afraid to confess all this. That was Robin's testimony. From that testimony, they finally had a clue, and the private detective persuaded Robin to testify to the police about all this. They even ensured Robin's safety and guaranteed that Robin wouldn't be punished if he confessed everything, and helped the police investigate to clarify this case. Not long after, All of them, Evelyn, Arnold, and Dagami, were finally arrested at a house in Angeles City. They were arrested 2 months after carrying out their action. They were detained and interrogated, and eventually, the police found the key to the crime scene, considered strong evidence, found in Arnold's house. So, after all the unusual circumstances and even strong evidence found, they had no choice but to confess everything. Evelyn admitted that she had done all this because she truly didn't love Stephen, and she wanted to possess all of Stephen's assets to enjoy with her lover, Arnold. Meanwhile, Arnold admitted doing all this entirely because he wanted to steal all of Stephen's assets by taking advantage of Evelyn. Arnold even admitted that he liked Evelyn only because he wanted to take her money, which was a lot. And Dagami admitted doing all this because he was tempted by the promise of generous payment for an easy task. Because initially, according to him, it was very easy to kill a foreigner just living alone in the Philippines. Because of this, Evelyn was sentenced to 40 years in prison without reduction or parole. Meanwhile, the two perpetrators, Arnold and Dagami, were sentenced to life imprisonment. As for Robin, he was declared innocent because he was considered unrelated to the murder, participating in the night of the incident in a state of complete ignorance of the plan. After this case, many people there, including Evelyn's family, admitted that she was too foolish to do all this, while her life had been saved by Stephen, who was truly sincere and loved her. Since knowing and marrying Stephen, her life had completely changed, from an entertainer at a suburban nightclub with low wages to a wealthy woman. Even her family in the village had become prosperous thanks to Stephen's generosity. However, she chose to betray just because she was tempted by a market security guard. After this incident, while initially Stephen's 2 children would be cared for by Evelyn's parents in their village, Stephen's mother decided to take Stephen's 2 children back to England to be cared for there. Stephen's mother worried that her 2 grandchildren would be abandoned, like Evelyn had been before, as the economic situation of Evelyn's family in the village was truly very difficult. This case still echoes as a warning about the value of education, not just for livelihood but also for character and ethics formation. It reminds us that material wealth doesn't equate to the richness of soul, and that in life, our decisions, whether good or bad, can create ripples affecting those around us. And that is the case for today. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.